Hello, this is Johnnie Taylor, City Manager in the City of Lexington, North Carolina, and I'd like to welcome you today to the podcast, Queuing It Up. So today I have a special guest with me, and his name is Mr. Mike Horney. And just to give you a little information about him, Mike Horney has served as the Public Services Director with the City of Lexington since October of 2021. Public services include the departments of administration, fleet, streets, recycling, and waste, and stormwater. So Mike holds a bachelor's degree from UNC Chapel Hill and a master's degree from UNC Greensboro in applied geography and urban planning. Prior to Lexington, he spent 18 years as a public servant with the town of Kernersville in diverse roles, giving him a wide range of experience and knowledge about local government administration and operations. He served for 10 years in the Public Services Department as the Operations Manager, where he managed technology, budgets, performance management, and the customer service team. In 2015, Mike was awarded the Public Works Executive Credential for Leadership Excellence from the American Public Works Association. Mike also worked an additional 8 years in the Community Development Department as a planner, GIS administrator, and development services manager, where he oversaw zoning, permitting, and inspections, and code enforcement. He's passionate about continuously improving the government's ability to provide quality services with a great intellectual curiosity and appreciation for all of the parts that make a city whole and successfully serve its citizens. Mike is married and has 2 sons, ages 14 and 12. He enjoys traveling, spending time with his family, and cheering for the North Carolina Tar Heels. Welcome, Mike. Welcome, Mike, to the Queuing It Up podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. So we're going to get right into the questions. The first question is, public services it's a broad spectrum. Mm-hmm. And so how would you explain what public services is to our residents?
That's a good question. First, I'd say it gets back into what is a name. A lot of people in a lot of cities, you would kind of equate the Public Services Department to a Public Works Department. But as far as in the City of Lexington is concerned, Public Services is a diverse collection of 5 departments whose sole focus is to provide essential services to all residents and businesses of our city. So I'll give you some examples. Our fleet department, their job is to keep all the vehicles running in the city. This includes emergency services, includes the utility vehicles, keeps them up and running, doing their jobs. Our recycling and waste department, they focus on collections of all waste and recycling materials in the city, keeping the city safe and clean. Street department maintains all the streets, sidewalks, curb and gutters, and the signage throughout the city. We've got 125 miles of roads, countless miles of sidewalks and curbs, and thousands of signs, and they maintain those. Stormwater department is actually focused on mostly on water quality in the city, but they also maintain a very old, aged drainage structure system of pipes and other infrastructure. And then finally, our admin department is here to assist to make sure that all this happens. We work with customers on their concerns, make sure that we get work orders out to our departments. We focus on the budget, and most importantly, we ensure the stewardship of the resources entrusted to us by the citizens of Lexington. One thing I'll say too is that we have 43 hardworking men and women across these 5 departments, and they come together and with the hope of making, or the goal of making, our city great.
Okay, so I would say a director has goals. Mm-hmm. So as the Public Services Director, what are your goals for the department, and how do you get there?
Gotcha. That's a good question. I'll give you kind of 2 answers to that.
Okay.
So I got big picture goals, and we've got our day-to-day goals. My big picture goal as the Director of Public Services is to make Lexington a city of choice. We want to do this by providing efficient, cost-effective services. We want to provide the best services. when you live in Lexington, I want you to have the best solid waste pickup. I want you to have the best roads we can possibly provide. I want it to be on par, if not better, than anywhere else in the Triad, anywhere else in the state of North Carolina for that matter. That is the goal. That's the big picture goal. So people have choices. They can live anywhere they want to. So I want people to choose to live in Lexington. I want to be, if you're from here, I want to be one of the reasons why you stay. If you are thinking of somewhere to move to, I want it to be one of the reasons why you come. So that's kind of a big picture goal. Some of the things that we've done to kind of achieve this is, we've revamped our leaf collection program, made it much more efficient. We're coming on, better schedules, more pickups, just making sure that that's being provided more to the citizens' liking. Putting more resources towards potholes, which we all know is a problem. And then also we're working on comprehensive plans for street resurfacing, as well as fully automating all of our recycling and waste services. So that was a very long answer. That is my big picture goal as the Public Services Director. We've also got several others. I want to improve cooperation among departments, including my own. We want to make sure that, if the stormwater group doesn't have a dump truck to do a job, that we can use the street departments. We're all in the same, City of Lexington. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Some of the stuff that one of the things that we're doing on May the 19th is we're going to be celebrating National Public Works Week, which is a very big deal in our industry. We'll get together and do a little celebrating for that. I'll just let everyone know how much I appreciate them. And another thing too is just make sure we continue to improve the responsiveness to our citizens. Like you and I talk about sense of urgency. Every concern is important, and it needs to be handled as quickly as possible and the best way we can. So those are my goals.
Okay, so you talk about Lexington being a city of choice. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's really important in my mind is the infrastructure. So what types of infrastructure challenges is Public Services trying to tackle at this particular moment?
Well, I can tell you the two biggest challenges when you're talking about infrastructure, it comes down to two things, the age and the cost. Lexington's an old city. It's been around for a while. It's got a great history. We've got a lot of pipes that have been in the ground for 100 years, a lot of roads that have been on the ground. A lot of our neighbors are building out now, and they have the infrastructure's new, 10, 20, 30 years old. We've got things that have been out there 100 years. So that's a challenge. And then, when you get into just the sheer costs of things, when you think about the fact that it's between $500,000 and $600,000 a mile to resurface a road, and then, there's only so much resources no matter where you're at. When you start thinking about 125 miles of street in the city and at $500,000 a mile to resurface, then you can do the math and figure out how long that will take, depending on what your resources are. Infrastructure, like we talked about with the stormwater pipes, a lot of them are very old, and old pipes rust, old pipes come apart, and when that happens, a lot of times the ground sometimes tries to come with it. So we're constantly facing sinkholes throughout the city. And other things that kind of deal with kind of old aged infrastructure. So those are my two biggest challenges.
So, sometimes I think there's a lack of really education, even from our side to our residents, about what determines whether we choose to pursue a street for resurfacing or not. How is that done? Because I'm sure that some may think that maybe we just say, hey, we'll get that one today. Kind of talk a little bit about that process and what we do in order to make sure that we're maximizing our funds and managing those problems that are the most severe.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good question. We get asked that a lot. I was actually thinking about that on the way here. People will call and say, I want to get put on the resurfacing list. Well, the truth of the matter is every road is on the resurfacing list. We're trying to get to all of them. I will say that one of the things that we have to do is, we have to distinguish between our commercial areas, our state streets, our Salem streets, the streets that the city of Lexington is responsible for, and then also make sure that we are working into, to resurface and do some things in our residential areas. So you have to balance that. You have to make sure that your critical roads, the ones that are used the most for emergency services, stay in a passable condition. There's a lot to take into account. Luckily nowadays, there's actually software that just you put in the conditions and it gives you some ideas on where you can go. You don't have to do that, but it gives you some ideas to kind of take a lot of the guessing out of it.
And another area that may be a little confusing is sometimes you may get a call about a particular street, and then you have to tell the resident, well, that's a state street.
Yes.
Versus a city street. So kind of talk a little bit about how that works.
The way I always explain that is you kind of go back to the history of the town, like right when it was, you think about all the main roads that come into town. You got, obviously your interstates, you've got your main street. Every town at some point was a crossroads. Those crossroads are more than likely going to be maintained by the NCDOT. The streets that came off of those main streets as the town grew were the responsibility of the city to maintain. So usually, even Lexington actually has more what I would call thoroughfares that we're responsible for than most cities our size. Typically, cities are usually responsible for residential roads, maybe a few collectors, and your main roads are usually the responsibility of the DOT. Here in Lexington, we've got the big ones are Main, Cotton Grove, Fairview, and we've got several others that we work with the DOT on when we have issues.
Okay, I know you've got several projects right now, but what project that you're working on that you're currently most excited about?
I've got several. I'll say that kind of back to this conversation, a lot of it revolves back around road maintenance. That's a big topic in the city right now, as we talk about quite a bit. We're working on a comprehensive pavement management plan. To your point, or to what we were just talking about, you don't necessarily perform the same treatments on the same roads. If you've got a road that's getting 10,000 cars a day versus a road that gets 10 cars a day, it doesn't need to be to the same level. It needs to be to the same standard as far as a passable, safe road that looks good, rides well, but you don't have to put as much resources into it. Your state street's going to cost more than your typical neighborhood road. So that's sort of some of the things that we're working through is, how do we spread the funds? How do we make sure that we get them throughout the city and in the places that they need to be? So that's one of the current projects that we're working on. We've also recently, it was announced about our Thriving Communities program, which you'll hear more about, I say, in the coming weeks. If you didn't see the press release, we are actually one of 52 cities nationally to be selected for this program, which is through the United States Department of Transportation. And we will be getting, what it basically comes with is free consulting services and planning services that will help us develop comprehensive transportation plans, bicycle pedestrian plans, working with our partners such as Davidson County Transportation on improving our public transportation routes. And then the most important thing is they're going to help us and point us in the direction of federal funding to where our citizens are not having to foot the bill for that. So that's a very, very big project. We've also got a few others that came out. We just did an Adopt a Street program. So if anyone watching is interested in adopting a street, we would love to have you. We got plenty of roads that need it. We also have an honorary street naming program. If you know of someone that you're interested in nominating for that, we got some information on the website about that as well. And I believe that's it. We're getting ready to start a stormwater mapping project. We were talking about those old pipes, many of which you actually can't see from the road. And we, through a grant through the state, we are getting ready to map the system so we actually know where everything is. A lot of times we find out once it fails. And we want to be able to be a lot more proactive rather than reactive in our maintenance of our drainage system. And then the last one I'll say is also through a grant with the state, we received 2 very large recycling roll-offs that you will be seeing at the next special event near you. They're very large green roll-offs, and they'll be very hard to miss. So we're excited about that.
Okay, wonderful. So here's kind of a question that I posed in the last podcast, and I'm going to throw this one at you too.
Okay.
So suppose I've got a time machine, and I pop out of this thing in 2034. How does Lexington look in your mind?
Well, I would just say when you talk about 2034, I think with our current focus on infrastructure, like we've been talking about, coming up with these comprehensive plans for pavement management, working on improving sidewalks, adding bike lanes. I know you've talked a lot about trails. I think that it's going to be. I'm not going to say Lexington won't be recognizable in 10 years, but it will be drastically improved. I think that especially if you looked at it from right now to then, over the next 10 years, obviously we'll be taking incremental steps to get there. But I think when you look back, you'll say, wow.
Okay. So what is something that citizens need to know about your department that they may not already know?
There's so many things, and I'll probably think of 10 on my way out the door. But one thing I will say, like we talked about before, one thing that citizens need to know is, we talked about the Public Services Department is 43 very hardworking women and men, many of which are your neighbors and that live in this community. And keep in mind that they want the exact same things that you want. They want to have a thriving community. They want to have a city that does that gives the best services, that is like the best place that we can make it. So we're all in this together. I think sometimes you hear a lot of talk about, well, that's the city, and I'm using air quotes here. But like I said, we're all in this together. We want the same things. We want to have a thriving community, and that's a goal of everybody that works in our department.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Horney, for being here today with us, and also thank you for all of the great work that you and your department does for the residents of Lexington, and it's just been very informative. And so I would say to everyone, to learn more about public services, visit lexingtonnc.gov. Go to the Departments tab, click on Departments, and visit one of the Public Services Department pages. These include recycling and waste, streets, and stormwater. For updates on future episodes, follow us on Facebook at City of Lexington and on the streaming platform you're listening to this episode on. For updates on future episodes, follow us on Facebook at City of Lexington and on the streaming platform you're listening to the episode on. If you've learned something new and got some value from this podcast, leave us a review or a thumbs up. We'll see you on the next episode of Queuing It Up.